In 1958, every member of St. Gabriel's congregation vanished during midnight. Mass, all 67 people gone without a trace. Their coats were still hanging, candles still burning, communion bread untouched on silver plates. The church stood silent for decades until a demolition crew uncovered a scorched diary buried behind the altar, wrapped in choir robes. The final page reads, "We heard them singing, then screaming. They're under the floor." When workers pulled up the stone tiles, they found fingernail marks, fresh ones, scratched from underneath. Don't open what they sealed. Especially after dark, the floor didn't break. It peeled. Graham felt it before he saw it, the soft, fibrous resistance under the crowbar, like lifting skin from damp muscle. Dust lifted into the air in a slow, reluctant fog. Not dry dust, dust that remembered warmth. The others had moved outside when the drill jammed, claiming electrical interference, but he stayed. He didn't believe in places holding memory. Not until now. The stone tiles didn't crack. They bent. The church had been abandoned since 1958. Its last entry sealed by water damage and red tape, literally red. A Ministry of Faith Preservation order glued to the door in 5 languages, none of which said why. There were no photos, no newspaper archives. Just a church with no records and too many pews for a town this size. His boots sunk slightly as he stepped across the exposed area. There was a smell rising now, not rot, not mold, warmed wax. Human breath. Dust that wasn't done becoming something. He paused near what should have been the altar. The cross was gone, stripped clean, but the shape of it remained negative space and soot. Behind it, a hairline crack ran down the wall like it had been drawn, not formed. He pressed his hand to it. Cool, at first, then warm, like skin exhaling. Blueprints they'd been given didn't show a sub-basement. But when he ran his fingers along the floor lip, he found a groove too clean to be time-worn. A seam, a trapdoor made of packed stone and hardened ash. Someone had closed it gently, and recently. He didn't speak as he pried it open. He felt, instinctively, that talking would wake something. The hinges didn't creak. They sighed. Below. Blackness. Not just darkness. A waiting black. And cold, until the breath came up. He stepped back instinctively. The flashlight flickered. Then stayed on. Inside, there were stairs. No dust, no cobwebs. Only silence that had waited too long to be heard. He descended slowly. He didn't call for backup. He wouldn't have been able to explain the reason why. The church floor closed above him like a confession being sealed. First sound, his breath. Then, another, fainter, as if someone else inhaled when he did. The room below was rectangular and low-ceilinged. Stone walls, but soft stone, like compressed bone. Shelves of hymnals half burned, half missing. Rows of shoes. Children's shoes, all left facing the same direction. None dusty. A mirror leaned in the far corner. It was cracked through the middle but reflected the space too clearly. In its surface, the shoes pointed the opposite way. Toward the altar. Toward him. His breath fogged briefly. He turned. No one there. Just a stack of books near a collapsed beam. He approached slowly, noting the scent. Now candles, sweat, metal. A choir robe hung from a nail, unmoving in the stillness. It was too small for an adult. Too long for a child. He knelt at the books. They weren't books. Diaries. Pages scorched at the edges, names scribbled out in red ink. One lay open. Written in block letters. We were told to sing when it happened. Below that, a drawing of a mouth stitched shut, yet wide open. Notes in the margins. A date repeated 4 times. June 12, 1958. He heard something from the wall. A tap. Then a pause. Then again. Like a knuckle, but too soft. Too slow. He turned, scanning the edges. No source. Then on the far wall, a drawer. Out of place. Ornate. A small handle made of dark brass, shaped like a cross upside down. No other furniture matched it. He approached, carefully knelt and opened it. Inside, a photograph. A group of children in robes, standing beneath the altar above, smiling. Behind them, adults, faceless, blurred not by camera quality, but by deliberate scraping dot in the corner of the photo. A date that hadn't happened yet. June 12, 1967. He checked the back. Written in faded pencil. Rehearsal went well. They sang until the floor opened. He blinked. Something brushed his shoulder. He turned. No one. But the robe now lay on the ground. Not fallen. Placed. Sleeves out. As if ready to receive someone. His light caught something on the floor behind him. A small object. He picked it up. A hymn torn from a book. The lyrics were crossed out. In their place, scrawled handwriting. Don't hum the last note. It's how they get in. Footsteps. Above. Slow. Measured. Then stopping directly above the altar. He froze. Dust fell from the ceiling, only where he stood. He held his breath. Silence again. A whisper. Not from the stairs. From beneath them. He turned to face the corner, where the mirror had once leaned. It was gone. He stepped back. Light flickering again. He found the mirror 5 feet away, leaned now against a child's pew. It reflected not him, but the empty staircase. He lifted his light toward it. In the mirror, a figure on the steps, robed, head turned slightly toward him. He spun around. Nothing. But when he looked back, the figure had descended 2 steps. Still not moving. Still not looking away. He approached the wall near the drawers, trying to breathe without shaking. He needed proof. Something to show the others. Something to remind him this wasn't a hallucination. Behind the drawers was a panel. Loose. Pried it. Inside, a compartment. Lined with velvet. A diary, burnt but still intact. On the first page. Midnight Mass begins below. On the last. We heard them singing, then screaming. They're under the floor. His hand trembled from the stairs. A sound, not footsteps. Breathing, not his. Then came the knock. Once. Then twice. Then a long silence. Then 67 knocks, evenly spaced. He stared at the diary. The page began to darken in his hand, not burning, but soaking in something unseen. As if the words were reabsorbing ink. A final line appeared as the light flickered. Midnight. Mass begins below. He dropped the book, and the silence folded back in, as if the room had never been opened. It had been years since Ellis wore his father's coat, but something about the way the cold settled into the church made him reach for it. Not warmth, weight. The fabric held the scent of old tobacco and musty sermons, as if it remembered a man who hadn't spoken in decades. It didn't protect him from the damp, but it grounded him. And grounding mattered here. St. Gabriel's sat in a valley where nothing grew. Not even moss took to its stone. Satellite scans showed the surrounding woods as dense green arteries, but the land immediately around the chapel was bone pale and veined with erosion, like it had been leached of time. Ellis stepped carefully across the warped wooden threshold. The door had been bricked shut, but the bricks were newer than the church, and someone recently had removed them from the inside. The pews remained intact, dustless, arranged with mathematical precision. No sign of animal entry, no rot. Not even spider webs. The altar was empty, but the communion table behind it was not. 2 silver plates, a chalice, a hymnal open to a song that had been torn in half at the final verse. The pages were water stiff, warped at the corners, but the bread's small white rounds, identical in shape, remained unspoiled. No mold, no decay, as if they hadn't aged, or had only aged in memory. He didn't touch anything, just stood, breathing quietly, listening for what the air might still remember. In the left apse, A candle stood. Thick, untouched, upright in a rusted iron holder. Wax had dried beneath it in a long, delicate spill. No matchbox nearby. No lighter, the wick was dark. But when he leaned close, he felt it. Heat, not warmth from a nearby body, not residual sun. Direct heat. The candle was burning. But there was no flame. He stepped back. Watched. Nothing flickered. But a faint trail of smoke unwound toward the rafters, as if the wick were exhaling something it no longer needed to see. He turned slowly. The stained glass windows had all been removed, ripped out, maybe sold. All but one, the northern panel. It showed no saints, no Christ, no Madonna, just a girl kneeling beside the altar, hands clasped. Her face scratched out, not broken scratched. Fingernail marks. From inside the glass. Ellis took out his recorder. Hit play, not record. He didn't know why. A soft sound filtered through the speaker, a child's voice. Breathy, unformed. They won't stop if you leave. He paused the audio. Stepped away from the window. In the corner near the vestry door, he noticed it. A drawer, not part of the altar. Not part of the original architecture. Just there. Small, made of dark oak, and carved with a symbol, an open eye overlaid by musical notation. The lines didn't match any known hymn he could recall. He reached for the handle. The drawer groaned open, reluctant. Not jammed. Inside. A photo, burnt around the edges, a class portrait. Or a choir, children again, robed, identical. Lined up. In 5 neat rows, they stared ahead, not smiling. One in the center had her eyes painted black, as if someone tried to blind her, long after the image had been developed. On the back, hymn practice. June 12, 1958. He froze. He'd seen this photo before, filed under a different church. A different name. SD. Laria's, hundreds of miles away. He flipped open his notebook and found the clipping. Side by side, same photo. Different captions. Different dates. Same burned edges. He heard a soft click behind him. He turned. Slowly. The door to the vestry had opened itself an inch. No wind, no pressure change. Just a gentle-minded movement. He approached it, heartbeat soft and steady. This was the part of the investigation they hadn't funded. The part where belief began to overtake protocol. Inside, the vestry smelled like wet earth and linen that had been sealed too long. He clicked on his torch. The beam landed on a wall of robes. Choir garments, folded with impossible precision. Each one was labeled. Names, ages. Rows of them, some sizes small, enough to belong to 7-year-olds. One robe was missing. In its place, a hymn. Taped to the wall, torn again at the last line. Below it, in pencil, someone had written, "The last note isn't sung. It's breathed." The floor beneath him creaked. He stepped back and noticed something else. A mirror. Leaning against the far corner, tarnished, dusty, cracked, but its reflection was wrong. In it, the vestry had no robes. No hymnal, just rows of pews. And a child, seated in the front row, facing away. He turned. No child. Looked again. Still there. Now turned toward him. Blank-faced. Not sad. Just waiting, his breath fogged. He blinked. The mirror was empty again. But now one of the robes on the wall had changed. It hung lower. Still, as if worn. He backed away. Slow. The candle in the app still gave off heat. But now the wax beneath it had melted further down the stand. As if time had progressed in that corner and nowhere else. He lifted the recorder again. Hit play. Silence. Then, breath. Then the same child's voice. But lower now, more certain. "Don't leave the pews." Pause. Then, softer. Not during the hymn. She found the stairwell by accident. Or maybe it found her. Celia's hand was pressed to the wall like it had a pulse. Beneath her fingers, the stone felt warmer than the air. too warm for this deep in the archives. She'd come for a filing error room 7C, hymn storage, ledgers. 1962 1978. But the door had been painted over, its brass number scratched out, and what she'd mistaken for a panel beside, it had given slightly under pressure. No hinges. Just give. She stepped through the slit in the wall with breath held. The air tasted of ash and iron, as if a candle had been snuffed 1,000 times in the same room. She didn't call for anyone. That stopped working years ago. The stairwell curved. Tight, like the building didn't want her going down in a straight line. Light filtered in not from fixtures, but from behind old glass slits in the stone-stained glass windows, with no chapel above them. She passed one that showed a boy with no face, just hollow white where features should have been. Another showed sheet music with red ink where notes should be. The air had the same stale pressure as the recording vaults. She paused halfway. Something was humming below. Not machinery. A child's voice off key, too slow. Like someone trying to remember a song they were punished for forgetting. She reached the landing. The corridor was lined with narrow doors, each set in dark oak, each smaller than the last as if sized for shrinking children. The last door had no knob. Just a smudge of soot on the handle plate, shaped like a handprint, too small to be adult. Not old enough to remember. She touched the handprint and the door unlatched, swinging inward on a soundless hinge. Inside, the air folded. The room was circular, stone-walled, with a vaulted ceiling where an organ's pipe should have been, but they drooped like melted candles, warped and silent. At the center sat a long bench, low to the ground. Robes hung from nails, too small, stitched with gold thread that had rotted in spots. Dust floated in beams of light that came from nowhere she could trace. Celia didn't step in yet. Her eyes were on the far wall. Mirrors. Dozens of them, each one framed in rusted bronze, each one mismatched in shape. Some oval, some hexagonal, a few broken. And in each mirror, her reflection blinked a second late. But it wasn't just her. In some, there were robes on the bench. In one, a hymn book lay open, its pages fluttering though no air moved. In another, a child's shoe rested just beside her foot, but when she looked down, the floor was bare. She stepped forward. The mirrors didn't fog from her breath, but the one to her left suddenly did, just for a second. A small shape of breath. Not hers. She turned. No one. But she knew that too now. The child was still humming, and from beneath the floor, it answered itself. Low, reversed organ tones, a call and answer loop like an underwater choir. Played backward, she dropped to her knees, pressed her palm to the floor. Cold, but then under her fingers she felt vibration. Not movement. Sound. She pressed her ear to the stone. There were verses, words shaped in breathless mouths. No consonants, just vowel weeping, and beneath it, all the sharp scratch of a pen on music paper. She stood. Her balance spun. In the mirror ahead, her reflection was sitting. She wasn't. The girl in the mirror wore a robe too small for her frame. Her feet swung above the stone. A torn hymn page was clutched in her hands. Her mouth opened, but instead of sound, a smear of red ink dripped from between her lips, running backward up the page. Celia stepped back. Her heel struck something. A drawer. She hadn't seen it. It hadn't been there, but now it was open. Inside, a burnt photo. Still warm. The edges curled like petals of flame. 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy, robed, staring at the camera with expressionless eyes. Behind them, a blurred figure in black robes with a conductor's baton. The boy's face had been burned out entirely. On the back, final recital, 3rd sub-basement choir. But the archive only went 2 sub-levels. She dropped the photo. Her fingers were black with soot. From the hallway behind, the humming stopped, and then repeated, exactly the same, a perfect copy. The sound didn't echo. Like it should have. It looped like tape. Celia turned back to the mirror. Now all of them reflected children. Not her. Not any adult version of her. The same children. All in robes. All slightly too small. All swinging their feet, and all with mouths just slightly open. As if waiting to be given a note to sing. One of them, the smallest girl, held something. In her lap, a music sheet. The same one from the drawer, but she hadn't put it there. The smallest girl lifted her eyes. Met Celia's in the glass. And hummed. A note that made the mirror crack. Just slightly from top to bottom. Celia turned to run. She made it into the hallway. Back toward the curved stair. But it wasn't curved anymore. It was flat. Forward. Endless. Same stained glass window repeated every few feet. Each time with a brighter red. She reached for her phone. No service. No time. The screen showed the date. August 3rd, 1973. It wasn't just wrong. It was familiar. She'd seen it on a torn attendance sheet once. Redacted. Marked as the day the basement flooded. And all rehearsal records were lost. She turned back to the room. Mirrors were gone. Just a wall now. But in the soot below the robe bench, a shape had been dragged, like something small had been pulled across the stone. A child's shoe lay where the line ended. Inside it, folded like a secret, was the hymn page, not torn. Not red-stained. Just titled, For the Ones Below. The intern had opened the wrong drawer. That's what they told her later. What they meant was, the drawer shouldn't have existed. No index number, no catalog tag. Just beneath the linoleum edge, in a filing cabinet misaligned by a 1/4 inch, was a gap fingertip wide. And inside, 4 folders. One scorched, one water-damaged, one sealed with twine. One labeled only in pencil, 118, recanted. She pulled it out with both hands. The paper had an unnatural heat, as if pulled from an oven, not a drawer. The air smelled like electrical fire and old choir robes. She didn't bring it to her supervisor. She brought it to the basement. The room used to be a records vault, but no one said that aloud anymore. The sign on the door read Faculty Storage. The lock was broken. Inside, dust hung in the shape of what used to be shelves. Forgotten breath. Stale light through an overhead grate that shouldn't have opened from this side. She laid the file on the table. A metal table, the kind with restraints sawed off. Across from her, an old monitor flickered amber-toned, still running DOS. The screen glitched every 6 seconds. Looping static like breath. She pressed play. Transcript log. Case number 118. Field Investigator G. Meyerson. This is Meyerson. Site 7C. I'm standing at the perimeter wall. Northwest quadrant. There's movement. I saw it again. The voice cracked, not from age, but from hesitation. Each word sounded half recanted before it landed. The kind of voice used when a mirror asks a question. First. The intern checked the attached report. Pages missing. Pages burned. She touched the edge of one, and ash came off like snow. The photo was still there, blistered at the corners, but visible. A stone wall, early morning fog. Behind it, the edge of a child's shoe. No body. Just the toe, turned inward, as if mid-step. At the bottom, in trembling pen, if it's buried, why is it still walking? She looked again. She hadn't seen it the first time, the reflection. In the puddle beneath the shoe, not the child. A man's hand, held up, fingers splayed. Audio continues. I was told not to dig, told it was sealed, but it breathes. The stone breathes, goddammit, the sound warbled. Then, silence too complete to be analog. Something had been cut. A breath fogged the screen. She didn't move. There was no one behind her. She wiped it. Her hand shook. Behind the monitor, a drawer. Shifted. She hadn't touched it. She hadn't even known it was there. The label was in Braille, inside. A hymn book with pages torn in exact intervals. Page 14, 29, 47, 61. Each removed with precision. She flipped through. One page remained folded. Hymn 118, Return Not to Dust. Without song. It was handwritten, a child's scrawl, crayon. Beneath it, faintly, we heard them through the stone. They didn't know the hymn. She reached into the file again. A mirror fragment, wrapped in gauze. The surface was fogged over, but beneath the smear, it reflected something wrong. Not her. Not exactly. Same clothes, same table. But the calendar. In the mirror read August 1983. Audio, last recording of G. Meyerson. I retract the previous statement. There is no movement beneath the stone. The child's shoe was a misinterpretation of debris. I was emotionally compromised. I apologize. The voice didn't sound coerced. It sounded erased, but behind the words, faint and warped, the intern heard it looping beneath the hiss. A child's voice. Singing. Just 2 notes repeated. Like a lullaby with its middle ripped out. She turned the mirror fragment over. On the back, etched with something sharp, don't apologize. That's how they take your mouth. The monitor buzzed. Then static. Then video. No timestamp. Just a camera angled down. Flashlight beam circling the base of a stone structure. Cracks. In the shape of branches. The voice, Meyerson's. If anyone finds this, they used to let the children play here. The records say choir recitals, but there's no choir now. Just echoes. Just movement. Just one frame. The shoe again. This time beside it, another. Smaller, facing the wrong direction. And behind the stone, a handprint. Wet. On the dry rock. Not smeared. Placed. I don't think they died. I think the building remembered them. The intern stood. The mirror fragment in her palm pulsed, warm now. Behind her, something shifted. A light through the cracked basement door. Just a sliver, enough to cast a long, wrong shadow. It didn't match anything in the room. She closed the file, opened it again. The photo had changed. Same wall, same stone. But now, 4 shoes. Arranged. In a circle. And something written in ash beneath them. Recanted doesn't mean false. It means forgotten for survival. She sat back down. The audio glitched, rewound without prompt. A mechanical twitch. The tape restarted itself. Audio, G. Meyerson, final entry, private line. I only said I was wrong because they showed me the ledger. My name was in it. Dated next year. Cause of death. Inhalation of dust in sealed corridor. The intern backed away from the table. She reached for her phone. No signal, just a faint hissing in the earpiece. A voice trying to start a word it had no tongue for. She looked back at the screen. Now split. A face, Meyerson's, pale, unmoving, and beside it something over his shoulder. The mirror again, but this time, instead of her reflection, herself, at the table. File in hand. Behind her, children. Silent. Mouths open. Audio, final line on tape. Why are their mouths open if they can't breathe? Click. Static clears. It began with her standing. Barefoot on the linoleum. Dust clinging to the arches of her feet like it had been waiting. No one remembered when she came in. The ledger said repainted 1973. But the paint on the walls behind her had peeled back to a color no one used anymore. She didn't speak when the nurse asked her name. Just turned her eyes, not toward the question, but the ceiling. They let her stay the night because she had the old pin, rusted enamel with the chapel emblem, the cross threaded by branches. One of the staff whispered she'd seen that emblem in a photo they weren't allowed to keep. Another remembered hearing a hymn from somewhere under the stairwell, where there used to be a choir pit, before they paved it over. That night, she drew. They gave her a soft pencil and a yellowing clipboard. She drew children, always from behind. Always looking over a railing, like a balcony too high for a chapel and too narrow for a dormitory. One child always wore a coat buttoned up to the chin. Another had no shoes. All of them smiling. Below the children, arms. Paler than they should be. Too many fingers, reaching up from beneath the floorboards. She drew it 3 times. Then she didn't eat for 2 days. They found her asleep beside the fire exit that led nowhere, now bricked shut since '81. Her drawing was folded beneath her head like a pillow. Her lips moved while she slept, whispering the same 4 measures of a hymn they couldn't place. A hymn with no key. The basement had a mirror. Not installed, leaning, as though it had been dragged from one room to another and forgotten midway. No one admitted to placing it there. Its glass was flaked with age, but when she passed it, she paused. Not at her reflection, at the corner. The top right corner showed a hallway that didn't exist. The edge of a window facing snow, but it was late summer, and the basement had no windows. She pressed her palm against it. Whispered, "That's not me yet." The nurse told her was a trick of the light. But the mirror didn't reflect the nurse at all. Later that day, the nurse reported missing. They kept her on the 4th floor, the one without blueprints. The floor no longer listed in the evacuation plans. She stopped answering to questions, only responded to music. If the old piano was touched even 1 key, she would turn her head sharply toward the sound, eyes wide like it had pulled something stitched too tight inside her. She spoke only once more, and only to the janitor. He'd offered her an old hymn torn from a discarded book. She took it without touching him, held it like paper should bleed. "I remember this before," she said. "I remember them breathing through the floor." He asked who. She pointed to the baseboard. "The ones in the crawl." That night he tried to report it. Found his key didn't fit the office anymore. Found the complaint forms were missing. Found the hallway to the staff quarters was longer than it had ever been before. 3 windows longer. 1 door more. They searched her room the next morning. Under her pillow, a burnt photo. The edges curled, the faces blackened. But in the upper corner, untouched, a girl with dust in her hair. Standing on the chapel balcony, arms held behind her back. Smiling. Below her, at the edge of the frame, a handprint on the wooden floor. Not her own. They tried to match the photo to records. None matched. The faces had been scorched off. But the balcony, the railing, matched the drawing. They called in maintenance to check the chapel. There was no balcony. There had never been a balcony. But when they peeled back the plaster wall, they found something behind it. A boarded up door, painted over too many times. Inside, an alcove. Narrow, dark. Scratches on the wall like fingernails had tried to map something backward. On the floor, a child's shoe, perfectly upright. Untouched by dust. She never said a word again. In the following weeks, staff complained of music at odd hours. Low, reedy organ notes. But the organ had been dismantled during renovations. One nurse claimed she saw a robed figure walking the old mezzanine at 3:17 a.m., but the building had no mezzanine. Another described hearing breath on the glass in the supply room. Fog forming where no one stood. The mirror from the basement went missing. They moved her to the observation room, newly soundproofed. Its walls painted hospital white, but the corners always looked damp. Like something behind them wept slow. They left her drawing tools. She didn't use them. Only sat with her knees to her chest, fingers moving like she still held the pencil. Security. Footage showed her motionless. But every morning, a new drawing appeared. No sound ever played back. But audio logs recorded something beneath the static breath. A whisper just above hearing. Always the same phrase. Find the ones who fell. The psychologist brought her a test. Colored blocks. A series of ink blots. She ignored them. Instead, she pulled a drawer that shouldn't have been there. Thin, long, horizontal, beneath the table's seam. Inside, ash. A hymnal ribbon. and a list of 67 names. The psychologist blinked. The drawer was gone. They found her one morning with blood on her solace. No break in the window, no breach in the door, but the walls showed something. Hairline cracks that hadn't been there the day before. And the nurse on duty swore she heard laughter from behind the mirror, the one that was never hung, only leaned and now leaned nowhere. She vanished during rain. The halls were empty. Her bed made, but beneath the mattress, a final drawing. Children on a balcony, smiling. Below them, the wood broken open. Arms clawing through. A small girl, center frame, looking back over her shoulder, her eyes scratched out, pinned beside. It, a hymn. Illegible, except one line. Dust returns to the dust. When they closed the file, they redacted everything. Names struck. Dates struck. But in the corner, a faint pencil mark remained. A number circled twice, 67. The basement wall was resealed, but every few months, the dust thickens again. And someone hears music through the floorboards. The hallway gains a window it didn't have. A drawer opens where none should be, and in the nurse's office, still stuck to the inside of a forgotten locker, a sketch, curling at the corners, 67 robed figures. Faces scratched out, and one in the center. Dust in her hair, smiling. They told Mara the chapel had been demolished in 1974. She stood before it now, wrists damp with breathless heat. Watching moths tap against its soot-glazed windows like they remembered something. The threshold bent beneath her as she stepped inside faintly, like something once scorched and set again under pressure. Ash pressed back, soft as stale communion. Bread. They'd sealed the place, Father Brinsley once said, with grace. But he hadn't meant the kind that forgives. The floor groaned a name as she moved, one syllable, repeated like a buried hymn with no lyrics. Mara. Mara, Ma. She stopped. Her boot had pressed into something just under the surface. She crouched. Pride. Ash flaked up around the edge of it. Scorched sole, toddler-sized, rubber-warped like it had been in a mouth too hot for prayer. A child's shoe, white once. The kind they wore for first rites. Still faintly warm. She didn't cry. She placed it beside her, facing the altar, as if it might still stand up and leave. There were no pews left. Just shadows where they had been. And a mirror. It sat angled against the altar steps, framed in brass gone black. Mara turned her face toward it and paused. Her reflection stared back. But not her. The reflection's hair was longer. Eyes paler. Behind her, not ash, not ruin, but rows of polished wood, glass intact. A hymn book opened to page 243. She blinked. It was gone. Mara's fingers twitched toward the leather pouch under her coat. She pulled out the torn square of photos she'd found in the sealed file, labeled Dismissed Occurrences -1956. The one burnt at the corners, scorched right through the face of a girl she couldn't name. But the chapel in the background matched. Same cracked bell tower, same iron vines curling up the walls. Same mirror on the altar steps. She slid the photo under the glass. Her reflection swallowed it. Behind her now, in the mirror's version of the chapel, a child stood, small, motionless, wearing only one shoe. Mara turned, fast. Nothing there. Just breath on the glass behind her, an oval of fog above the hymnal. Page fluttering with no wind. She didn't breathe, a sound. Not behind her, beneath. She crouched again. The floor didn't creak, it sang, a faint hum, low, like bones still remembering a melody. She set her palm flat. Warmth radiated. And beneath that, something pulsing, not quite rhythm, like the echo of an echo. She pressed harder. Her hand left no mark, but the floor gave slightly, like flesh thinly healed over. No tools could break it. She remembered those words. Only singing did. Her voice cracked when she tried. The first note bled from her throat like it wasn't hers. A chord followed, untrained, half-remembered. Like hearing your mother hum in a room she died in. The floor split. A hairline crack, silent and precise, ran from her boot to the base of the altar. Not jagged, intentional. As if the chapel had been waiting for the right note to remember itself. She didn't run. She slid her fingers along the crack until they found a notch. Hidden, a drawer, flush with the floor, where no drawer should exist. It resisted. Then opened with a sigh. Inside, a torn scrap of music, edges singed. A hymn she knew but altered. Different key, sharper, dangerous. The title was gone. Only the number remained. 243. She rose and turned to the hymnal behind her. Page 243 was folded, but not torn. The melody was clean, familiar. Too clean. She held the burnt version next to it. Every note matched. Except the last measure. In the drawer, it resolved upward. In the book it stopped. Censored mid-chord. She sang the drawers. Version. The mirror responded. Not light, motion. Her reflection stood again, but this time, someone stood behind her, robed, tall, mouth sewn shut with black thread, but humming through it. She turned. Fast. The chapel was empty. No, it wasn't. A whisper. So low it felt. Like air leaving a sealed room. Downsizing. The voice came from the wall. Behind the altar. She moved toward it. Slowly. Her body remembered something before her mind did. A weight. A touch. Hands on shoulders, steering her forward like she'd been here before. The wall was too clean. No soot, no ash, plaster intact except for one thing. A handprint. Small. Palm out. Pressed deep like clay, but set in stone. 5 fingers. One crack down the middle. Still fresh. She pressed her hand to it. The stone gave. It shouldn't have. Behind it. Darkness. Not a room. Not a crawl space. A corridor. She stepped through. Walls too narrow for adults. Lined with hooks. Some held fabric. Robes, tiny and black. One held a collar scorched half through. Another, a burnt ID tag. Collins J. Metal warped. Name nearly unreadable. Mara turned it over. A date scratched in. June 3rd, 1962. That wasn't possible. She'd seen Collins in a photo from 1971. A teacher. A priest. Standing next to a class that no longer existed. She stepped deeper. Something moved in the dark ahead. Not footsteps, dragging. She raised her light. No shape, just a smear across. The ash on the floor. Bare toes. 4 prints. Then none. At the end of the corridor. A door. No knob. No hinges. Just 3 dots carved into the center in a perfect spiral. She touched them. Her breath fogged the wall. On the other side. Something laughed. Soft. A loop. Like a recording left on too long. Childlike, but wrong. She didn't open it. She backed away slow. Careful, until her heel struck something metal. She turned. The altar, back where she started. But the mirror was gone. In its place. The burnt photo, now whole. And wrong. The girl had a face now. It was Mara. No longer aged. Younger, in robes. One shoe missing. Singing, eyes wide with something. Between memory and fear. She dropped the photo. It fluttered once. Landed face. Up. Next to it. A chisel, bent, rotted at the edges. Handle charred, the wood curled like it had been gripped too tightly in fire. She picked it up. Ash fell from the blade. So did a whisper too quiet to place. A phrase she'd heard. Before, no tools could break it, only singing did. The chisel pulsed once in her hand. And from behind the altar wall, the same 3-note melody, played back like it remembered her, like it always had. She turned slowly. Looked back toward the cracked stone, the print still warm. She wasn't the first to press there, but maybe. She'd be the last to leave. The floor wasn't stone. It was pressed ash. It gave slightly when stepped on, like old bread. They say that priests sealed it with grace, but their robes were stitched shut at the mouth. No tools could break it, only sinning did. The chisel was still warm. It started with the creak of a drawer that hadn't existed the night before. Mara hadn't come to the church basement looking for answers, only a place that wouldn't echo when she cried. But now, knees folded beside the rusted filing cabinet, she watched the lower drawer shift open by less than a finger's width. The air changed with it. Not colder, not warmer, just accounted for, like something had stepped in. She waited. A moment, a breath, then reached. Inside, paper coarse, too thick for copy stock, bound by red twine, edges blackened. And there, tucked between the folds, a burnt photograph, curled by flame. 4 girls in confirmation white, 2 of them blurred, one missing her face entirely. On the back, March 12, 1963, our girls, Amen. The girl second from the left. Mara knew her, not from memory. From the mirror, the same wide mouth. The exact tired way her eyes set too low, but it couldn't be. That photo was older than her mother. She folded it into her coat's lining like it would burn skin if left in air too long. The drawer shouldn't have existed. The entire wall hadn't been on the blueprint she pulled from the town record office last week. According to municipal storage, the church's foundation ended 5 feet behind her, but beneath her boots, the floor hummed. Soft, like listening. Through a pillow, she pulled out the files, one by one. Ledger paper with ink that pooled strangely at the loops. Names written twice in some cases, other names smudged into nothing. Some were crossed out, others duplicated with tiny differences, letters reversed. Middle initials vanished. At first, she thought it was clerical error. Then she saw her own name, Mara Eileen, written in sharp, urgent red. And again, 5 lines. Down, same spelling, same birthday, but followed by deceased. She staggered back. A hymn sheet slipped loose from between the ledgers and drifted down like falling ash. She caught it mid-air. Hymn 44, "Oh, take my name from the book of stone." The corners had been torn, notes rewritten in a child's handwriting, fragile cursive, as if practiced in secret. At the bottom, a tally mark, then another. 67 in all. Something whispered beneath her. No voice, just ink curling. She moved the cabinet aside. The floor groaned. It wasn't tile closer to carpet, but slick, water-warped. She dug a fingernail into the seam where the floor met the baseboard. It lifted. Beneath, soft plywood, worn down by weight. A hidden hatch. No lock, just resistance. A kind of hush. She opened it. Stale air spilled upward, syrupy and sharp. She blinked against it, eyes stinging. The crawl space led into shadow, but something glittered inside. Glass shards, scattered like teeth, no mirror fragments. And among them, a child's shoe, red, bow still intact. Its twin missing. Mara lowered herself in. The tunnel was shallow, barely high enough to crawl. Every inch forward, her hand landed on something else. Ribbons, pencil stubs, a page torn from a diary. "They called me Marie today. That's not my name," ink smudged. But below it, another tally mark, 68. Her breath caught on glass. She moved toward the shimmer. A mirror waited at the far end, set into the wall. Uncracked, polished, wrong. It didn't reflect her flashlight. It didn't reflect her. Instead, the girl from the burnt photo stared back, older now, maybe 15. Wearing Mara's coat. Behind her, the hallway flickered like film left in heat. The mirror read a different year, 1971. She wasn't born yet. The girl blinked no, mirrored and whispered, "You came back late." Mara turned. There was no one. But behind the mirror. Light shivered. She leaned in closer. The breath she didn't take fogged the glass. Words bloomed in condensation. My name was borrowed. She stepped back. The crawlspace had shrunk, or grown longer. She wasn't sure, but the hatch above was no longer visible. She moved fast, scraping knees, ignoring the glass that nipped skin. Like teeth. When she reached up, her fingers touched not wood, but concrete, not ceiling, floor. She screamed. No echo. Just the soft, repetitive sound of chalk against stone. Tick, tick. Tally marks, now visible along the tunnel walls. Some were scratched by nail, others drawn in lipstick or coal. Each one matched the hymn sheet. The same spacing. The same desperate spacing. She followed them forward. Eventually, the tunnel opened again. A basement room, this one larger, silent. Untouched, no furniture. Just papers lining the walls like peeling bark. Parish lists, files, drawings done by children's hands. A house with no doors. A girl with a red bow. A figure with a line for a mouth. In the center sat a desk. On it, a diary. Blue cover, corner stained with ink. Mara reached for it. The first page was dated 5 years before she was born. Each entry ended with a tally mark. Some pages were torn out, others blacked with ash, but the last 10 remained. And in them, drawings of the hallway, of the mirror, of a girl with her same face, weeping behind glass. They said if I signed it, I'd be kept. They used my name because it matched the form. I stopped speaking, and they said I never existed. 60-7. Then, at the margin of the final page, etched with the tip of a nail, my name was borrowed. I'm still underneath. Mara closed the diary. Her hands shook. Behind her, the mirror hummed. She turned. It was mounted here too. But cracked now. A long hairline fissure running down the left side, pulsing softly. A breath fogged the surface. She hadn't exhaled. And behind her, inside the reflection, a girl leaned forward, matching Mara's every motion except the eyes. Theirs moved independently. Watching her, her coat had changed in the reflection, burnt at the sleeve. Ash on. The collar. The girl opened her mouth, but the sound came from the wall behind Mara. A voice, muffled, a child's. I wasn't the first. You just remembered me first. Mara spun. Just a wall. Padded with old hymnals. Their titles redacted with tape. O come the nameless. Children of borrowed breath. Hold thy silence. She clawed at them. They peeled loose like scabs. Behind them, plaster. Behind the plaster, brick. Behind the brick, she felt it was hollow. She knocked. Something knocked back. She didn't scream. Just placed her palm flat. Fingers emerged beneath hers, too small. Too cold, too certain. She yanked away. But when she turned back to the desk, the diary was gone. Only the hymn sheet remained. Tick, tick. She looked down. The floor now held a grid of scratches. 67 tallies. The 68th was fresh. She didn't make it, but it was in her handwriting. She backed toward the crawlspace. It was open again, and above it, just visible, was a single photograph taped to the concrete. New. Undamaged. 4. Girls. This time. All visible. One in Mara's coat. In the margin, in red ink. Amen. She reached for it, her hand shaking. But as she pulled it down, her finger brushed the surface and the image smudged. Her face dissolved. Behind the photo, another. Same image. But one girl buried up to her knees in ash. Mara's coat on fire. She stumbled back, clutched her chest. A whisper. Now behind her ear. You were supposed to die in her place. She turned to run, but the mirror caught her reflection before the hallway did. In it, Mara. Mouth open. Eyes too wide, and behind her more girls. All wearing her face. All tallying something on their arms. And all mouthing the same line. My name was borrowed. I'm still underneath. The old music wing had been padlocked since 1983. Even the hinges had memory rusted into a refusal. But he found the duplicate. Key in an envelope inside his own personnel file, which should have been shredded 6 years ago. The folder smelled like mildew and ammonia, but it knew his name, typed, then crossed out. Then typed again. Russell hadn't returned to the choir hall since they'd told him what he remembered was grief displacement. That the extra children he swore he saw standing by the pipe organ were likely projections, his psyche unable to process the gas leak that supposedly claimed 3 of the actual students. But the gas report never appeared in the audit. The photos were gone from the yearbook. The hymns sounded different. He touched the rusted handle and the hallway light behind him flickered, a soundless strobe that made the burn mark on his wrist pulse like it remembered heat. The door groaned open, not into blackness, but a stalled dusk. Light swam through high-stained windows like it couldn't decide what century it was. The organ's mouth yawned above him, its pipes dull and furred with dust. The silence was not silence. It had breath. The first thing he noticed was the mirror dot. It shouldn't be there. Hung from the back wall where a crucifix used to be. A wide rectangular vanity mirror, too clean. It reflected the room behind him, but not as it was now. He looked. Aged, yes, the burn on his wrist visible. But the room and the mirror had children. All seated, uniformed, still. None of them moved. One girl, the 4th row, 3rd from the left, had no face. Just a smooth shimmer where her features should have been. He turned. Nothing there. He turned back. She was gone from the reflection now. But the pew where she sat held a single child's shoe. He approached. It wasn't dusty. Black leather, polished, the buckle loosened as if it had been slipped off with reluctance. He knelt. The floorboards beneath it were warped, as if something had pressed up from underneath, breathless, wanting. He remembered. No, not remembered. The tape. He unzipped his satchel and pulled out the reel. Choir practice. March 7th, 1983. Tape number 9. He remembered hiding it in the music office duct when they started questioning him. When the other teachers called his stories episodes. He hadn't listened since. He carried it to the control booth. The audio system was still powered, oddly. A single green LED blinked like a watch underwater. He slid the reel onto the player. Pressed down the dusty play key. Static. Then the piano. The slow lead in to hymn 42. Let all mortal flesh keep silence. The children sang. Wrong. 2. Slow. Their vowels stretched like silk tearing underwater. One note off. One child off. His hands trembled. He watched the mirror. As the hymn continued. Faint fog blossomed on the mirror's lower right corner. Breath. The pews in the reflection were no longer empty. They filled as the recording played. Row by row. Children appeared. Not standing, not walking. Just there. 62, if he counted fast. Same number as roll call that day. Until the last. It came after the final note. Just as the children in the mirror went still, staring forward. A second voice, much older, rasped, 67. Then laughter. Too close to the mic, distorted, joyless, predatory. And then the sound of feet small, many scrambling. He stopped the tape. Silence again. But the mirror fogged once more. This time, breath at child height. From inside the glass. Then came the drawer. He heard it, not saw it behind the pipe organ. The low rattle of wood against frame. A drawer that by all memory and architecture did not exist. He approached. Behind. The central pipe, beneath the platform, the paneling had a seam hairline thin. He pressed. Wood flexed, gave. Inside was the burnt photo. He recognized the faces. Himself, younger, 5 children. But the photo was wrong. Melted at the edges, the center bubbled like it had been microwaved. The children's faces were blurred, except one. The same girl from the mirror's faceless pew. Only now her face was his. Russell dropped the photo. The mirror didn't reflect him anymore. It reflected the choir. The real room remained empty. but the mirror showed them singing. Soundlessly. Mouths agape in pain or reverence, he couldn't tell. One boy in the back row raised his hand. Behind the boy, a cracked door. Light through it pulsed. He turned. The wall behind the organ was seamless. No door. The tape crackled again. He hadn't touched it. Rewinding on its own. The hymn again. Slower now. Reversed. Each word sung backward. Each syllable becoming less musical. More mechanical until, underneath, that voice returned. 67. 67. 67. He screamed and ripped the tape from the player. Silence. But the mirror still showed the boy with his hand raised. Still. And this time, he was seated beside him. Hairline cracks in the mirror began to spread, thin, brittle veins crawling outward. He stepped back. His heel caught on the child's shoe, and he fell hard against the pew. On the floor, he saw it etched in the wood grain under the pew. RM went missing here. But they filed it as transfer. His initials, not a note. A carving. Faint but unmistakable. He stood slowly. The mirror, now webbed with cracks, showed not the room anymore, but a hallway. Not now, not past. It looked like a year not built yet. Newer tile, white. Fluorescent lights too cold. Down the hall. 5 children walked in step. One turned. It was him, younger, mouth moving silently. The mirror shattered. The lights in the choir room flickered. A breath fogged the air just behind. Him. He turned. Nothing. But the hymn page fluttered down from the rafters, torn, yellowed. Hymn 42. The last line circled in red pencil. Double quotes. And whisper not, lest the counting begin. Russell's mouth opened. No sound. A soft knock. From inside the organ. Once. Then again. Then 5, all at once. He dropped the reel. It spun wildly across the floor. Plastic ticking. Then stopped. He picked it up. The label choir rehearsal tape. Number Y was crossed out. Below it, scrawled in new ink. Children present. 62. Plus 5? She didn't remember walking back inside. The door had opened too softly for its rusted hinges, and the entry hall had that damp breath it exhaled only after a lie had settled in long enough to grow moss. Lena stood on the edge of the chapel's nave, unsure if she'd left it or never truly returned. The air was colder beneath the rafters, but not the kind of cold that wind carried. It was the kind drawn from beneath tiles, from stone that knew grief. Rain tapped the inside of the windows. Again. But the skies had been clear all morning. She held her coat tighter, not from cold, but to keep her thoughts from falling out. The sound was slow, too deliberate to be weather. A rhythm with memory. A timing too human. The altar had a basin, brass ringed and overcleaned, though no one had performed baptisms here in decades. Still, it refilled itself, always when no one watched. The water had a sheen to it, viscous, mineral, and wrong. She had once touched it. It had tasted like metal. Not copper, not blood, but something older. Something traced through pipes no one remembered installing. The ceiling directly above the basin had darkened again. She stood beneath it. Rain fell directly on her hair, but only in that spot. Her shoes remained dry where she stood. No droplets struck the floor. The water passed through her, and she felt it collect somewhere deep, where memory softened. She looked up. The ceiling wasn't cracked, but it moved. A hairline fracture widened only when unobserved, like breath caught in sleep. It throbbed, not violently, but patiently, waiting, the same way the mirror in the vestry had waited. Lena turned, slowly. The mirror still hung crooked near the side door. Its frame blistered, flaked with time, but its reflection was sharper than the air. She hadn't approached it in years. She had been 12 the first time it showed her a year that hadn't happened. The pews had looked burned. Names had been painted on the walls, children of the third ledger. And in the reflection, her own face had stared back, older, bleeding from the mouth, saying nothing. Just mouthing the hymn that no longer existed. In the books, she'd torn that page out then. Hid it. Years later, she'd found the same page again. Folded into the lining of her coat sleeve. Same burn along the edge. Same handwritten notation in the margin. Sing this only if no one else hears it. She still carried it. It crinkled now as she moved. Water in her hair. A drawer creaked. Not the ones under the altar. Those had been nailed shut during the incident. No. This was from the wall. The side paneling had opened near the choir loft. A narrow drawer slid out of a place that hadn't been there yesterday or last decade. Inside, a photo. Burned. The face missing. But the hand on the shoulder was hers. She recognized her ring, the one she never wore because it didn't exist. Not in this year. The drawer slammed itself shut. Somewhere behind the wall, a second noise followed, a soft dragging. Like something not used to walking was trying again. She pressed her palm to the panel. It was warm and breathing. There was no handle. A hymn echoed, faint. No choir. Just one broken voice, as if sung through a speaker buried under years of candle wax. The same lines repeated, but shifted slightly each time. A wrong word, a new tone. They said the water would clean us. They said the stain wasn't ours. Her breath caught. She recognized that voice. It was Father Reynald's, but his throat had collapsed in '92. She'd seen the autopsy report. Redacted but incomplete, like it had been redacted too early. Before the body had finished speaking, the basin behind her rippled again. Lena turned. A child's shoe floated in the water. Clean, new, no laces. She didn't move. She couldn't, because in her memory, she remembered pulling that same shoe from the baptismal drain 15 years ago. When they said there was no child, when she'd reported it, they'd shown her the ledger. There was no listing for any baptism that month. No listing for any child in the county born that year. But she remembered the mother. She had stood outside the chapel for hours, weeping, rocking, holding air. The shoe bobbed. Something shifted beneath it. Lena stepped back. The hymnal books all opened simultaneously. No breeze. Just pages turning, as if someone had given an order or a warning. One book had her torn page, reinserted, water damaged, marked in rust. The margin note had changed. We were never meant to dry. A crack widened above the altar. This time, it bled. Not red, not black. Something in between. Translucent, but with memory suspended inside. Tiny filaments. Threads of hair. Glass? No. Too soft. It dripped into the basin. The water turned a dull green. Then moved. The shoe sank. Not fast. As if it had decided to leave. She backed into the center aisle, heart held in the back of her throat. She wasn't alone, but not because someone had entered, because someone had never left. The mirror. She turned too late. The mirror showed. The pews again. Filled. With children. Silent. Not watching her. Watching forward. All identical. Same haircut. Same folded hands. No faces. And then one moved. Raised a hand. Pointed at her. She blinked. The mirror was empty again. Just pews. She backed toward the exit, hand on the brass knob that always stuck in the heat. It turned. Easily. It shouldn't have, because it wasn't the door she came in from. Behind her, the sound of a drawer again. Then another. Then another. All from places that had no drawers. She looked back once. A redacted file lay on the altar, soaked. Pages fluttered as if underwater. Names had been scratched out, but all with the same stroke. A child's hand. Underneath, one line had been left intact. We returned them cleaner than we found them. Her foot slipped. The aisle beneath her was wet. Not the carpet, the structure. The floor itself had grown damp, as if the foundation was Exhaling water. The light through the chapel's cracked door caught something. A handprint pressed against the inside of the stained glass panel. Too high for a child. Too small for an adult. No footsteps led to it. She fled, out through the door that didn't stick, onto stone that remembered. The rain had stopped, not outside, inside. Behind her, the chapel breathed in. She turned only once. The mirror inside now faced the door. And on its surface, her reflection, but older, and whispering something she couldn't hear. Not through glass. Not yet. She didn't remember getting home, didn't remember unzipping her coat, didn't remember falling asleep. Only that when she woke, her hair was wet. The basin was gone. The chapel had never existed on the map, but in her hands, a page, waterlogged, curled at the edges, handwritten. We were told it was holy. She hadn't meant to return. Not to the chapel. Not to the air that still smelled like wax and rotting hymnals. But guilt moved faster than memory, and when Marlene's heel touched the cracked tile just past the vestry door, her body remembered where to go. It had been sealed. Officially, the wing was condemned, the stairwell bolted, the south pews tarped. In mildew, but the latch had been replaced. Recently, new brass. No dust. She stepped through, past a curtain that wasn't fabric, but fused soot. Some fire had tried to eat this room whole. A burnt photo lay half stuck to the floor near the pulpit. She knelt without breathing. It came up too easily. A choir, children, black and white but not old. Not old enough. There, back row smiling through dirt, one tooth missing, hands folded. Too tightly was her. Ellie Doran, the girl who wasn't enrolled. The girl who didn't exist. The girl who always sat one row closer. Marlene should have left. But the door, soft behind her, had stopped breathing. She checked over her shoulder. There was no door, only a frame now. The pew still smelled of oiled pine, but under it, under everything, was something older. Wet cloth. Iron. Dust that remembered bones. The altar hadn't changed. Still slanted slightly left, like the room had shifted around it. A mirror leaned behind the pulpit, flecked in black rot. She stepped closer. Her reflection was not hers. She wore the same jacket, but the mirror showed the 1958 version of it, before the stitches, before the melted patch on the sleeve. Her hair was wrong, parted center. Eyes duller, behind her pews were empty, but she was in one. The Marlene in the mirror was sitting fourth row, hands clutched, knuckles white. She watched herself, watched her watching her, and didn't blink. Marlene turned. Fourth pew, empty, dust undisturbed. But something small was left under the bench. It hadn't been catalogued. She crouched, head nearly touching the wood, and slid her hand underneath. Her fingers met fabric. Then buckle. A child's shoe. Too clean. The tag inside read, Ellie Doran. Room 3C. That room didn't exist. Not anymore. Floor plans from 59 showed a broom closet. Files from 58 said she'd never been admitted. No birth record, no transfer forms, but she remembered Ellie. Everyone did. No one said so. They'd all seen the yearbook shift, that quiet tilt. First row, then closer. Then dash center. Marlene stood. Fast, breathing shallow, the shoe heavy in her palm. A tear in the hymnal beside her caught her eye. Page 87. He knows the names the wind forgot. Torn straight through the refrain. She flipped it. A folded square fell out. A second photo. This. One color. Warmer. Blurred along the left edge like a lens had cracked. The same choir. Older. One boy missing. Two new girls. Ellie closer still. Knees just touching the altar steps. Marlene flipped it over. Spring. Term 1958. Memorial Assembly. But the fire hadn't happened yet. Ellie had vanished in February. She shouldn't be in this photo. The mirror groaned. It wasn't wind. It was weight. Movement. She turned. The reflection was wrong again. A figure under the pew. A hunched shape, knees drawn in. Breathing. Hair matted to the side. Marlene spun to face it directly. Nothing. But the air held breath. And the mirror still showed it her, curled fetal beneath the fourth bench. Face pressed to her knees. Ellie. The shape moved only in reflection. Then she lifted her head, mouth open. Dirt on her teeth. Like she'd eaten soil to stay buried. She whispered something. Marlene leaned closer to the mirror, not the pew. One word. Stop. Behind her, a drawer clicked. There were no drawers in CHAPELS. She turned too slow. Sliver of wood extended from the altar base, about 2 inches. Marlene stepped toward it, each breath a question the room didn't answer. She crouched, pulled. The drawer came easy. Too easy. Inside, folded blue cloth, part of a uniform. A ledger, and a strip of microfilm in a labeled sleeve. Room 3C. Pupil observations. 1956-1958. No projector. No time. She flipped the ledger open. The first page had been sliced clean. Out. Second page started mid-sentence. Does not respond to auditory prompts. Smiles at incorrect intervals. Appears during drills, but is absent from official counts. Student may be figment of class-wide delusion. Suggest halt in documentation pending further. The ink ran off. Marlene shut the drawer. When she looked up, the mirror was empty. Then, slowly, her reflection walked in. Not her, not now her, but another her, younger. Paper badge on her sweater. Room 3C. Marlene hadn't been in 3C, ever. That room was for. She couldn't remember. The reflection opened its mouth. A sound came not from the glass, but from the wall. 3 knocks. Low, soft, measured. Under the pew again. The shoe was gone, replaced with a hymn, folded twice. She opened it. He knows the names the wind forgot, rewritten in crayon. Red, crooked. Words changed. He holds their names where walls decay, under pew and lock and day. He marks the ones who should have drowned. He leaves their shoes to stain the ground. Her breath fogged the glass, but she wasn't standing near it. Behind her, the fog formed again. She turned. Not even warmth. The air was wrong. She walked backward toward the frame that used to be a door. Then saw it, on the far wall. Where the choir robes used to hang. A handprint, too small, too low, pressed into the stone itself. As if the mortar had softened to let it through. Marlene approached, within the palm print. Initials, ED. She pressed her own palm to it. It fit too closely. Behind her, the mirror cracked. Just a hairline, but it moved. Marlene stepped back, shaking. And then something sang, not aloud, but through the room. A harmonic vibration that filled her teeth with taste. Chalk, blood. It was coming from beneath. She lifted the rug beneath the front pew. Tile. And one tile had been scored at the corners, not broken, not displaced, just lifted once, then replaced. A square too precise. She didn't move it. She knew what the shape meant. She knew the room had been waiting. Instead, she reached into her coat, pulled the last item she still carried from that day, the burnt photo. Ellie. She placed it gently on the tile. And left the chapel. The frame of the door still there. But what lay behind it had changed. Later, in the archive, she requested a copy of the 1958 yearbook. Redacted version, they said. Fire damaged. Missing pages. She waited until no one looked. Opened the back cover. Their center. Fold. Memorial Choir. Spring term. Ellie. Dead center. Smiling. Photo. Dated after the disappearance. She's still there. The tape clicked once in the dark. Celia didn't move. The breath in her chest had learned how to still itself, as if afraid of being recorded too. The recorder lay on its side, red plastic dulled by dust, its play button jammed in with something sharp, maybe a nail or a chipped tooth. The altar above hadn't been used in decades. The stairs behind the sacristy had no record of existing. And the door at the bottom, widened by the dragging of something heavy, had no lock. Just a mirror bolted to the wall beside it. The mirror showed a year that hadn't happened yet. In it, Celia's reflection wore a gray uniform she hadn't owned since she was 12. Her real self, the grown version with bitten nails and 2 scars across her lower back, stood barefoot in silence, lit only by the breath flicker of a low candle. The flame shivering like something being watched. The recorder clicked. Again, that's when the hymn started, not soon breathed. Not in harmony, layered, like the inside of a wall had learned to echo. Celia stepped forward, her right foot grazing something soft. She bent without thinking. A child's shoe. White, rubber-soled, with 3 pinprick burns melted into the canvas like cigarette ash. The laces had been retied into a bow she recognized. Her sister used to tie shoes that way. Loop, loop, twist, pull through. But her sister had been 8. And buried. They said. The tape hissed and hummed, rising like pressure. Celia pushed open the door. The air changed. It didn't cool. It thickened, like walking into breath left behind by a choir that never exhaled. The room beneath the church wasn't a room. It was longer than the blueprint said was possible. Vaulted stone ribs hung overhead, heavy with rot-colored damp. The walls bore scripture, but the paint bled in reverse. The verses started clean and ended in smeared black. Spirals, as if the hand that wrote them had been taken mid-sentence. A single pew remained, on it, a burnt photo. She picked it up. The center was charred black, but the edges held shadows. 4 figures. A priest, a girl, a kneeling boy, and someone standing behind them who wasn't facing the camera. The girl wore Celia's face, but younger, frozen in. The expression she'd worn the day the basement was sealed. There was no mass scheduled that morning. But the church bell had rung anyway. Celia sat on the pew without meaning to. Her thighs touched something carved into the wood-deep grooves, evenly spaced, as if someone had dragged a fingernail down with each prayer. The hymn changed. Now it looped. Sanctum in Ossibus, vocant in noctum. She had heard that voice before. They said the tapes were blank, that the children were misremembering. That, her own drawing of the underground chapel, had just been copied from a fairy tale. But this voice was hers, younger, out of breath. And it ended with a sound she had no memory of making. A sharp inhale, then a click, the sound of seeing something you weren't meant to. She followed it. Past the pew, past the half-melted candle on the stone step, to the wall behind the altar, where the lines of the stone didn't match the rest of the architecture. Her hand touched cold, that was too deliberate, stone colder than stone should be. She pressed. It opened like a drawer. Inside, a hymn torn from a book, a red cloth, and a mirror shard wrapped in gauze, stained with something too old to name, and a note. Don't sing it out loud. The drawer snapped shut. Behind her, breath fogged the mirror again. But she hadn't moved. Celia turned. Now there was a handprint. On the glass, child-sized, still fresh, no smudge where it should have been pressed. Just 5 points of contact, dry, dusty, but wrong. It wasn't the hand that scared her. It was the fact that it was hers. It aid. Her palm had been traced once for a Sunday school project. Her sister had kept the cutout in a shoebox. It had a nick in the pinky outline from where Celia had slipped with the scissors. This print had the same flaw. She staggered backward. Her heel struck something hollow. A floor tile shifted. Then she heard it scratching beneath. Not frantic. Pattern, measured, like fingernails on wood, slow and pulsing. She knelt and pulled. The tile gave way. Below it, a book, redacted, pages sliced clean out. But one remained. Burnt at the top, margins inked with dates and times in pencil too faint to read. And a final sentence. Those unburied sing through the mortar, you must not answer. The hymns returned, but now they were backwards, words folding over themselves. Names, one name hers, not sung, pleaded. Then the lights changed, from the ceiling. Through a hairline crack, something moved. It wasn't light. It was the absence of it, like a shadow trying to crawl back into a body that no longer existed. She stood up, trying not to breathe. That's when she saw the second drawer. It hadn't been there before. The stone didn't show the seam, but the mirror caught it angled perfectly so she could see what wasn't visible otherwise. She opened it. Inside, a cassette. Label: Mass, March 3rd, 1997. That was the day her sister disappeared, they told her. She'd imagined the singing, that the ashes in her sister's shoes were from the furnace, that no mass had been held that day, but this tape was warm, still ticking, like it had never stopped. She placed it in the recorder, pressed play, static, then chanting. Then the moment, a scream that wasn't a scream, more like breath forced in reverse. She hit stop. She couldn't move, but the mirror shifted. Now it showed the chapel behind her, but the pew was full. Children, kneeling, hands folded. Every face one she remembered from the downsizing. All staring forward, unmoving. Except one. The girl on the end turned, looked directly at the mirror. At her mouth moved. One phrase. Same one Celia had once whispered when she was 8, hiding in the church crawlspace, blood dripping from her knee. After a fall, listening to voices below that weren't priests. Don't come back. They pray you do. Celia dropped the recorder. The mirror cracked. A single line, hair thin, splitting the reflection from her left eye to the child's gaze in the glass. Behind the wall, the scratching resumed. But now it wasn't scratching. It was whispering, voice playing backward, and she heard it clearly. Stay quiet. They listened through the stone. He hadn't spoken since the siren stopped, not after the tape began again. Not after they opened the door they swore wasn't there last time. They found him in the corner of the chapel basement, knees drawn to chest, teeth chattering, not from cold. His fingers were clutched around something that wasn't his, a burnt photo of children, blistered at the edges, faces half melted into the paper like they'd tried to push through. The walls here still. Lead mildew, soundproofed in the 60s, one man had said. For choir practice, another had insisted. But the hymn books were gone, all except one torn page lodged beneath a rusted pipe, its music notes buckling like teeth. Esther was the one who finally stepped forward. She had not returned to the building in 42 years. Her name was never in the files. Yet the school had her handwriting on attendance sheets, columns ticked in red pencil. All left-handed, all hers. She bent near the boy, if he was a boy. His eyes flicked to the corner again. They're under the floor, he whispered. His voice was the weight of dust in lungs. I didn't put them there, they asked. Esther's breath clouded in front of her face, though the room was dry and still. She reached into her coat. The mirror came out first. Small square, cracked it. Date scratched into the silver backing. 1978. Still coming. The mirror showed her as she was, except the wall behind her was missing, replaced with rows of chairs, all empty, facing forward. She did not turn around. She tucked the mirror into her pocket again. Behind her, a drawer she hadn't seen before creaked open. The sound was too slow. Like it wanted to be noticed. It had no handle. Just fingernail marks. Inside, a child's shoe, white canvas, no sole. A date written in permanent marker inside the heel. Jan 5th, 1969. Her brother's birthday. He never turned 6. The floor beneath them gave a soft pop. The man cataloging the room's contents, the archivist, they called him, though his badge had no name, froze mid-step. Did you hear that? Esther didn't answer. The boy hummed. It was the tune from the torn hymn. Another pop. Closer. They cleared the center of the room, moved shelves, lifted rugs. Beneath the cracked tiles, there was wood. Beneath the wood, something older. And beneath that, something that hadn't wanted to be remembered. The archivist's crowbar caught a seam. The boards gave with a sigh, not air, breath. The silence after was long. So long that the camera operator, a quiet girl with a long scar over her collarbone, whispered, "I'm still recording." Light fell through a hairline crack above the door. It moved, slowly, as if breathing too. The space below was barely wide enough for crawling. But the boy went first. No one asked him. T.O. He just dropped down and began humming louder. Esther followed. Her hands brushed the walls of the crawl space if they were walls. They pulsed slightly, not organic, just warm. Like memory. She saw where the dust turned to handprints. Tiny ones, some smudged, some sharp as pressed ink. All of them pointed inwards, as if they had waited. Midway through the crawl space, the boy stopped. He held something out. Another photo. Burnt at the corners. This time, Esther took it. She dropped it. It was a class picture. She was in it. The date stamped at the Kia. Bottom was 1975, but she hadn't been in school that year. She'd been committed. In the photo, her face looked the same, except her eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were looking past it, behind the rows of children. Someone had scribbled 3 black circles in a triangle pattern, just above the doorway. "I don't remember this," Esther said. But the walls didn't care. The boy kept crawling, farther down. The space opened into a chamber, square. No lights, no windows. Just that feeling like standing where someone used to pray, then stopped believing. They found the first pile of clothes, near the wall. Uniforms, ribbons, even eyeglasses folded neatly. Then the hymns. Dozens of hymn pages torn from spines, taped to the ceiling. Each page had a different handwriting. In the margins, the same phrase, "They made us sing after." Some pages were upside down. Esther didn't cry. She touched a ribbon with her own initials embroidered in thread. Her mother had stitched it for her first day. But it was never returned. The school said she'd run away. She never remembered packing. The camera whined. The battery was full. The boy walked to the far corner, sat cross-legged, and began humming again. Esther looked at the floorboards above. They were thin from beneath. Scratched. Some places had names carved in. Lena Devant Win. Winetwin T. Develu. The last plank was stained darker. She knelt and pressed her hand to it. It was warm. The archivist called from behind. "The floor plan ends here. This room doesn't exist." Esther didn't respond. She whispered something instead. Her lips didn't move, but the camera caught it, barely visible in frame. A single sentence. "Truth doesn't rot. It waits." Then she started to hum with the boy. Their voices overlapped. One sharp, one soft. Upstairs, the hallway lights flickered. Not off, just enough to change the color of everything. The girl with the camera turned around to ask something. But the room was empty. No boy, no Esther. Just her. And the burnt photo, now lying face up on the chamber floor. It had changed. Now the entire class looked at the lens, all except one child in the front row who had no face at all. Just a blur. The same child from the first birth photo. When the footage was reviewed later, the timestamp stopped counting at a wee, but the tape kept playing. It why. Someone off-screen began to hum again. Not the boy, not Esther. Another voice. Higher, hollow. The hum fractured into breath. Then came the sound. Not a scream, not a thud, a soft knock. From under the floorboards. Then another, then 67 more.